This stands for jump if yes, jump if that match was found. And so we jump to the next problem.
This is not a university lecture in progress or even an A-level course in computer studies. The setting for this lesson is Carsick School at Sutton in Ashfield, Nottinghamshire. And teacher Derek Daines is talking about the computer language pilot to a class of 10 and 11-year-olds. In fact, computers are as much a part of their daily diet as school dinners. These children are fortunate in having the opportunity to learn about the subject so early in their school careers, because there's a strong need now to lay the foundations for future training. Barry Sherman explains.
When you're looking at what to do for the future, I think there are one or two things you can pick up. I think the first thing is to look at France. Now, they've done two remarkable things. They're very inventive, the French. The first is they have a plan to have a computer in every single school. Now, that's very important, because it means that people can play with the computers, and I mean play with them, and doodle around with them. And it's not a question of just learning about them, it's a question of not being scared of them, and seeing that they're not marvellous, trendy science fiction things. They're actually quite simple things to operate, to use, and everything else. And we're nowhere near that. I mean, if we get computers in schools, it seems as though the Parent-Teacher Association has got to be wealthy enough to afford one. And that leaves out an awful lot of children, does it not?
Luckily, the pupils at Carsick are not being left out. Here, girls and boys are getting a real pleasure out of working with the computers in a variety of subject areas. There are no fears, and the pupils concentrate hard on the problems the computers are setting them. In these examples, they're solving multiplication sums. I asked the headmaster, Mr. Goring, about the school's philosophy behind the scheme.
Here we have a new tool that's going to make a vast difference to our lives in future. There's no reason why children shouldn't start as 5-year-olds even in schools to get experience of this. Let's first remove the fears that we have of strange new machines, and then let's find out what they can do to help us, and then let's try to train our minds, and this is where it comes in perhaps most, helping to train the mind to think logically. I think that's the biggest thing that the whole computer business has to give us in schools, as far as children are concerned. What these children are getting is first experience of getting their hands on a machine, losing the fears, beginning the logical train of thought that we need to solve problems all through life.
Even if a school lacks a computer, there are other exercises that can be just as useful in developing logic.
Now, you've finished, have you? Time's up anyway, isn't it? Yeah. Now, let's see. Are all the thick here? Yes. Yes, they are. Are all the reds there?
Yes.
Oh, no. Look. Oh, no. What about this one? You see, this red one is outside the red circle, isn't it? So it should be there. And that thin blue one should be out, shouldn't it?
Useful skills can also be developed with the planning and preparation of flow charts. The idea is to break down a familiar activity like having a bath or boiling an egg into separate logical stages.
Get the phone directory, pick up the phone. Well, here you're picking up the phone before you've actually found the number. Huh? So you're going to stand there with the phone in your hand, looking through the directory. Have you finished? Right. Now, what are the two possible answers? Yes or no. So you need two ways out of that box, don't you? One labelled yes and the other labelled no. Mm-hmm. Is the water too hot? So it'll be a box like that. What do you think you'll do first if you're making a cake?
I asked Derek Daines about the value of the work he was doing with logic blocks and flow charts.
I think what one is doing is training logical thought and possibly also giving some sort of philosophy to life, the approach to problems. It just so happens, and fortuitously and very happily, that it coincides with discussion of computers and it gives insight into computers too. So the two things go hand in hand. We can do a lot of work with binary and hexadecimal, of course, which leads on to computing. They can actually program the computer for themselves in a simple way. Of course, they're only very young, so I don't expect much of them in this sense. But outside of that actual training, any school subject will lend itself in one way or another to being taught or tested or improved on the computer.
Although the clear message at CARSIC is to get pupils working with computers and on computers as early as possible, there's also considerable scope for developing logical thought, the basis of all computer activity, in their work with logic blocks and flowcharts.
In my view, for what it's worth, I think that secondary schools ought to have not just 1, 2, 3 or a dozen. They ought to have something like 20, 30 or even 40 microcomputers in the secondary school. In that way, you would find teachers overcoming prejudices. You would find employers overcoming prejudices. You would find teachers teaching not only about the computer, but also with the computer, which is going to be the biggest application of all. Have you finished? No. Back again. That's fine. Now we've got to consider, yes, we have finished. So what are we going to do when we have finished?
Here's a simple example of a flowchart designed to get a robot across a road. Start. Is the robot at the crossing? Yes or no? The answer is no. So the robot must move towards the crossing. Ask the question again. Is the robot at the crossing? Yes. Right, turn to face the crossing. Next step. Are there any vehicles approaching? Yes. Then wait 10 seconds. Ask the question again. Are there any vehicles approaching? No. Okay, proceed to cross the road. Ask the robot, have you reached the other side? Yes or no? No. Then continue crossing. Ask the question again. Have you reached the other side? Yes. Now the robot has crossed the road, so it can stop. Many schools are aware of the challenging demands of a technological society. Barry Sherman argues that we must rethink our attitudes to education now.
Right. I think it's very tragic that people can leave school because we're without a job at the end of the day. Because there is a kind of contract that exists in Britain, which is that you learn to read and write and do your arithmetic and be relatively good at school, turn up on time, and as a result, you will get a job. And I think this has been the kind of the post-war thing in Britain, because we've had relatively full employment since the war, and now we haven't. And I think that the education system has got to come to terms with this over time, and it's got to perhaps get away from those bits of paper. It's got to actually teach people at school to learn, not just read, write, and do arithmetic, but learn so that when they're confronted with new things after leaving school, they're capable of learning those new things. And I don't think the education system actually does that at the moment. It's quite good at getting people to get those bits of paper. That doesn't mean you're capable of learning new things that come along.
Kettlethorpe School Wakefield is one school that's thought long and hard about how it can help its pupils. Deputy Head Duncan Gawthorpe.
In this particular school, we found that we're generally agreed that there are a number of areas in which we can make some fairly easy and instant progress. One of those, for example, is to provide all our pupils with a short but very powerful computer awareness program, so that by the time they leave us, every pupil in this school has had access to the computer, has played around with it, has talked about its implications, not necessarily with a computer technology expert, not necessarily with a teacher of computer studies, but with one of our staff who teaches on our guidance program.
It can calculate, but then so can a calculator. But the advantage the computer has is that you can put a series of instructions into the computer. You set the computer off on the calculation, and it goes right through it on
It's not just a question of learning new skills. There's also the challenge of updating old skills. This is the school office, and here the pupils are learning how to produce a mailable document. But no matter how nimble-fingered you are, mistakes do occur.
Try and keep your eye on your copy, Yasmin, rather than on the machine all the time. Well, actually, I don't really think that is a good erasing, is it? And that, of course, you've overstruck that letter there, which, of course, isn't allowed, is it? And no punctuation marks. We started with dear sirs, so what should be the complimentary close?
Oh, yeah, it should be faithful.
That's right.
But keyboard skills once learnt can, with training, be transferred to the school's cleverly adapted word processor. And for these pupils at Kettlethorpe, a chance to put their typing ability to a new test.
Right, stop typing, girls, please. Now, Mr. Quarton is going to explain how to use this machine. Now, in order that I can show you how to use it, then I also have to learn how to use it.
the edit cursor in the right place, so hit the space bar.
Before the class have their turn on the word processor, the teacher, Mrs. Tyndall, must be taught how to adapt her own skills to fit in with the demands of the new machine. There's no copy paper at this stage. Everything that's typed appears on the screen, so worries about over-typing and erasing can be forgotten.
Each line, and it looks correct.
Once the letter on the screen has been checked for errors and corrected, it can be printed automatically on the teletype. Linking school experience to industrial experience is an important element in the Kettlethorpe scheme. This is a commercial word processor, the IBM Display Writer. It works to a similar pattern, and it has the added advantage of a built-in dictionary. Spelling mistakes or words that are run together are highlighted in green boxes to help the operator identify them. It's a simple task to correct errors.
Straight to the next point of change, omission, where we've left out a character. If we don't know how to spell the word, we can always look it up in the dictionary. Go straight to the next point, which is an addition. Go along, remove the extra character, goes to the next mistake, which is where we've run two words together, and just move along and put in the space. And then we say print.
A copy of this printed memo is stored in the computer. It can be recalled when necessary and added to or changed. There will be no need to retype the memo all over again, as would be the case with a conventional typing system. Back at Kettlethorpe, the pupils are getting an opportunity to try their hand at working with the new word processor.
You made a mistake.
Right.
You put an extra O in. Now, in order to get rid of that, first of all, you've got to get back to it without getting rid of the letter.
Besides working with computers, what other schemes are the school operating? Director of Studies, Duncan Gawthorpe.
We've tried very hard to involve parents in the process of selecting the sort of courses that youngsters do. Mostly, that takes place in our option interview situation, where parents and pupils work with a member of staff in choosing the sort of course that the youngster will follow.
I'm a civil engineer, and nowadays I've noticed that more and more my work is, computers are coming into my work. I feel that if he wants to do a science-based career, he will need computers.
Our philosophy and thinking about computer work is considerably wider than the small number of pupils who would offer the subject at examination level. Quite obviously, it's of very great relevance and will be of even greater relevance. The horse that gallops down the course of the 1980s and the rest of this century, we do know that. What I'm pointing towards...
Here, Headmaster Mr. Athy, backed up by his staff, takes the responsibility of working with parents, listening to their concerns and discussing the children's courses.
Thirdly, we're seeking to establish closer and closer links with employers, with industry, to use their expertise, their facility, at a time when our own is of a very limited nature.
In 1657, John Amos Comenius, an educational reformer with considerable insight, wrote, "The older children should learn the important principles of the mechanical arts, both that they may not be too ignorant of what goes on in the world around them, and that any special inclination towards things of this kind may assert itself with greater ease later on." He wanted learning to be rapid, pleasant and thorough. These pupils are tackling the problems of the mechanical arts with the aid of 20th century technology, but the principle behind the words of Comenius is the same. At Dagenham School in Doncaster, pupils following the control technology course work on problem-solving projects that combine flair with technical know-how.
Oh, yeah, 1, yeah, 3 O's, 2 ones, yeah. All O's and 2 ones at end. Yeah. Not. Yeah. Not 1. No nots.
The problem the pupils were asked to solve was to build a machine that reverses when it hits an object and reverses again after a short distance, but without hitting an object. Pupils in the classroom are working on a variety of problems that require a wide range of skills, creative thought, knowledge of materials, and the ability to construct the answers.
Now, why do we do this? We do this because there is a need, and has been for years, for students who are going to leave school at 16 or even 18 to know something that what's going on in the outside world. Well, actually part of a basic scheme that we have in the course, whereby students start with simple switching. This is showing how, by means of a single switch, you can make a vehicle go backwards and forwards, and that's all it is doing at the moment. However, if you introduce a second switch, you can then make the vehicle stop as well as go backwards and forwards. In fact, although that's very simple, when we set this problem to students, there is more than one solution. In fact, one of the solutions that we have in the follow-up material which the students use is a student solution rather than some member of staff having devised it in the first place. The scheme leads on from that to fitting a sensor, a micro switch or a reed switch or a photocell system at one end of the vehicle. It then, say, strikes an obstruction, and we ask the students then to make it reverse a certain distance.
Most of the machines use electronic control devices. The application in these classroom projects forms a useful link with microelectronic controlled machines working in industry. Both require the ability to analyse a problem and devise an answer.
This is a machine which students wish to be able to have a machine which won't fall off a bench. A very trivial sort of problem it may seem, not an industrial problem perhaps. It may well be if it's modified. This was wired up by a student. I have no idea myself what the circuit is, to be honest. Sometimes I wonder if it will ever fall off. It gets very close to the end, as you see.
This project, using compressed air and valves, copies the step-by-step operating methods of a real automatic drilling machine. Drill out, clamp out. Clamp in, drill to a precise depth, drill out. One button controls the system. Today we've looked at a number of ways in which schools are using computers and microelectronics, not as expensive games, but as valuable tools in the learning process. Back at Carsick School, teacher Mrs. Wendy Atkinson talks about her experience with computers.
My initial reaction was that they were very, very costly, and I didn't think that the expense was justified. And then when the prices started to come down, it seemed that they were even less expensive than a lot of the gymnasium equipment that most schools have. And as for being frightened of the technology, well, yes, I was. I was afraid that, you know, I'd press the wrong button and make a mess and make a fool of myself. But we were fortunate, of course, because we had somebody very interested on the staff. And if you've got somebody who is willing to take the interest and who can program, then your problems are solved because they will do it for you. And the machines aren't that frightening. If you just make a mess, you can start again. It only takes a few seconds. And very useful if you've got 35 to 40 children in a class, which most teachers have. An assistant, even if it's only an electronic assistant in the corner, has got to be useful.
In the next programme, computers in industry.